Okay, we'll get started with our committee on the homelessness. This is technically our second meeting of this month, which fortunately gives us a lighter agenda, so we'll actually be out of here probably. We won't be pressed up against the hour and a half like we normally are. And also I can see our crowd is a little thinner than normal, which is probably a good thing. Let's begin with introductions, and can we start with Madam Chair?
Pete Peterson, Kemp State.
Forrest Dunbar.
John Wellington.
Bill Evans.
Patrick Flynn. And Mr. Chairman, you promised a brief meeting, so I may have to be a little bit early if we go all the way to the witching hour.
Melinda Freeman, Department of Health and Human Services.
Arthur Jones of the Agricultural Department.
And in the audience as well?
Devin Kelly from ADN. Sylvia Pinocchio, Alaska Development Retailers.
Kirk Rose, Anchorage Community Land Trust.
Jeff Jesse, Mental Health Trust.
Lisa Sauer, Beans Cafe and Children's Lunchbox.
Beth Wilson with the Division of Behavioral Health.
Dave Egbert, Christian Health Associates.
Carrie Collins, Alaska Housing Finance Corporation. Carmen Wenger, Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness. Sherry Laurie, Downtown Kitchen. Judith Anbury, Homes Committee for Channel Park Community Council. Ursula Lindsay, Concerned Citizen.
Louise Decker, Industrial Aid Back.
Laura Athens, Community Member. Priscilla Young, City Council Office.
And Mr. Leo.
Ron Oliva, property owner. Tom McGrath, assistant.
Fiona Johnson, Visitor Center.
Eric Glass, American Food Women's Union of Alaska.
And we have been joined during the interim by Mr. Train. And Mr. Basket, you're on the phone?
I am on the phone, and I just want to say that I have a chamber meeting that starts at noon out here in Eagle River, so I might sign off about 11:45.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we have our agenda, and our first item is Mr. Oliva's report on East Downtown Business Update. Ron, the floor is yours. All right. Look like a lawyer there, Ron, with all those documents.
Well, that's already went to law school. You guys don't know that. I have my full pin from the tear gas canister. Invasion of Cambodia killed 4 students at Kent State. Still have that in my pocket. 1970, 46 years. 4 more years and I'll retire my keychain. I never forgot about civil liberties and the right to protest. Pay to do the crime, do the time. Chief Justice Douglas. Here. I'm Ron Oliva, not mostly a welcome guest here, but hey, I've been next to the Brother Francis Shelter, Beans Cafe. I was a member of the 500 Club for the Brother Francis Shelter when they first started. The reason I ended up buying the land adjacent to the shelter was that they had a warehouse. And as good Catholics, good Christians, they would never rebuild in an heavy industrial area, on a truck route, on a hill, and basically inappropriate place. When they went to rebuild, I sued them on a public hearing. It was a strange set of circumstances, but the alternative location is where animal control is located. Behind the police station, close to the Native Hospital, close to API, close to the university, and rebuilt in a heavy industrial area. At which time, it's become so toxic, not by me, not by Penco with supercritical high pressure oxidation of hazardous waste, which the shelter and Beans didn't protest, but they worry about my wood stove, the smoke bowers of those hazardous waste would have killed those homeless people. The point is throughout the years, I've supported homelessness, but now it's become so toxic that they want to put up a bigger fence to protect my industrial lot from the homeless. That's how bad it is. Now, you can wimp and cry about a little camp here, camp there, citywide project, but guess what? They said triage, 3 days, you're in and you're out. Cap it at 100, 120, went to 240. Guess where they're at now? 400. Now, would you like 400 of those people next to you every day? I've had a gun pulled on me. I've seen, if it wasn't for the pipeline and watching the magazines, I worked in a sewer plant 49 weeks straight. We got every dirty magazine burned in the incinerator, but the laborer returned them, kept them, traded them to the Teamsters for liquor, and he made a lot of extra money. I don't want to look at another book, but if you want a live porno show, come on down anywhere near the shelter. It's terrible. I mean, and what really upsets me is when the prize pig gets auctioned at the state fair, it's donated to Beans, and the executive director invited 4-H children down there to see the good they do. Believe me, you don't want a child anywhere near those facilities. And all you Bible thumpers who want to quote whatever whoever said, "But for the grace of God go I," believe me, never throw your pearls unto swine. Check that one out. And that's what's happening. You're watering the weeds. You're feeding not the homeless and the hungry, but creating a subculture that's toxic to the city. And you're exploiting them by making money on them. It's an industry. And every time I see them passing out money here, I go, what's that? I thought you were going to solve the problem, not live off of it. So from the bottom of my heart, last week, the guy was from Boston. He said, there's an alternative to Housing First. Wanda died. Believe me, Wanda died. Throw up another candle at Beans Cafe and have a memorial, because no one's going to show up. The family members of the woman who died there on the side of the boulevard, 2 weeks couldn't identify her. They identified her on one side of the ADN, on the other side, obituary. 21 relatives listed. And what's happening with homelessness, where were those 21 relatives? We're driving a wedge in the family unit, and it's breaking the fabric of this country. Welfare. I mean, this is going from a worker state to a welfare state, and we're committing self-destruction and suicide. Now, what's my plan? You can't touch Beans. You can't touch Housing First. They ran it down our throat. It's like, why come to the meeting? Why contribute? How many of you read my letter? Actually read. Why didn't you come down? Take a look at what's going on. I'm the guy who sees it, 724s. And not one of you in this room would put up with it for, I'd say, 5 days. And then you'd say, shut those places down. And the alternative was, let them die. How many of you read the book, The Tragedy of American Compassion? It's the history of helping welfare people from the time of the Pilgrims. What you're doing with Housing First and these subsidies will never work. You're basically pouring your money down the toilet. And if you flush twice when you use the facilities, it's a long way to Beans and the Brother Francis. Because they robbed me not only of the $100,000 in reduction of assessment on one property, and I own 11. That was $100,000 on all of them due to the stigma of the Brother Francis shelter in Beans. They also took my health. I mean, they're toxic to look at, screaming, yelling, showing me their breast. Oral sex, anal sex, regular sex, sex I could never even dream of or imagine in the open. Disgraceful. Nothing done about it. It's not on my property. No, it was on my property. When I called it in and they had, Cupcake Ministries, gotta feed them on Labor Day. I didn't have my cell phone. And this woman was getting humped like a rabbit. And I ran across the street. I said, hey, who's in charge? Get a cell phone, call the police, because she's not responding. Guess what happened? I drove around. She didn't call. She didn't call. And she had no permission to be on Oscars. full of garbage and hamburgers and potato salads because you're relieving your own guilt by allegedly helping those people. You're doing more than just watering weeds. You're propagating that population. And it's morally wrong, especially with housing first, because that's assisted suicide. You're helping them drink, staying in there. And what about single mothers and children? $260,000 a unit for John Thomas? You can't do that. I mean, it's insane. You've created a ghetto from the jail to downtown, and you're spreading it. And it's shameful, not economical, and it's immoral. So, I'm here to give you a little revelation that the overflow impact that you're sending me, there is nothing I can do to have you comply with the conditional use of the negative impact on the neighborhood. Are you familiar with my lawsuit? Sued the city, didn't want to do that. Sued Beans and the brother Francis. Health, safety, economic interference, and quiet enjoyment. Guess what happened? I settled for $30,000. Went back to the assembly, offered the money back. Did I do that, Pat? Guess how many people showed up for that money? Oh, I need money, I'm broke, I need this. How many people showed up for $30,000? I'd like to use a four-letter word.
I'd rather you didn't.
Okay, none! None! 30,000. Because you marginalize and show no respect for the neighborhood that you're in. And it's no wonder we want you out of that neighborhood. You don't comply to the conditional use. You reported negative impacts, a negative impact of a lawsuit at the conditional use survey before planning and zoning. It's a non-consent agenda item. You know what that means? There's no public hearing. I couldn't tell them I sued them. You think Susan Bomalonsky, big Catholic, would say, oh, Fairview Community Council, our best neighbors, Mr. Constant. Best neighbors, right? Showed up at all the meetings when they want something, but after they get it, vamos aquí. That was wrong. The negative impact exists. You can't do anything. I pull that conditional use on a drop of a dime. 5,000 calls. This guy's after Brown Bay to get 4 security guards. They have 4, he wants 8. I've asked for Brother Francis and Bean's private security. Nothing. They get volunteers. That's like have a fox watching a hen house. There's no discipline. The second thing is garbage removal. You've never seen so much garbage. I donated to ARPA. I gave them the van. They had all those volunteers. I hauled off the garbage for years. 27 tons annually of filth that was supposed to be picked up with that conditional use. It didn't happen.
Ron.
That's my 5 minutes. I'll summarize.
10 minutes is beyond, but
No, that's all right. This is important. You said it's going to be a short meeting.
got another minute.
All right. She's the Gestapo timekeeper there. Kind of got a clock at the assembly. The third thing is the crosswalk. It's 2 truck routes. There is no crosswalk from Reeve to way over to Cordova. You can't cross that street sober. Why would you do that? And then the overflow's going to the Anchorage Community Health. My answer to this? Buy me out. I want out of there. You've ruined my life. I don't go to church because hypocrites are up there. I fell in the ice shoveling up poop that they give away the toilet paper to, blew out my arm. During recovery, I blew out my back. I would be on full disability, but guess what I lacked? Being an alcoholic. I said, I'll take up drinking. just to get out of this. So whatever you do, the best thing you can do is contain that down there. Buy my properties. No one has to see those people in camp sleeps on a street or anything else. But all of you, if you have a conscience, you come down and walk in my shoes. And you know what you'll come to? The Darwin theory. Those people don't deserve to live. And when you call them animals, it's an insult to the animal kingdom. And that goes for some of the leadership who exploits it. Can I ask if there's any questions?
I'll do that for you. Are there any questions for Ron? I don't see any, Ron.
Because your minds are made up. You don't want to be confused with facts.
All right, moving on. We have a report on the Alaska Veterans Foundation, Vet Village, and Mr. Davis.
There's about 40.
Jeff is with me today. We're working together on this project. Today, 22 American veterans, both men and women, will kill themselves. That happens day after day after day. In our work to try to understand what particularly homeless veterans need, I constantly ask myself that question: why? Why does this happen? Most of them happen to be in my generation, Vietnam veterans. But there are two things that happen, particularly in combat veterans, like my son, 4 years in Iraq, when they get out of service. First of all, there's an enormous sense of loss. They have lost their family. Some of them have been part of for a decade or more. Secondly, if you're a combat veteran and you see a significant amount of combat, we have something called survivor's guilt. As a medic Vietnam 65, I know that very, very well. But it creates a pain in you, and you can't get rid of it. That's why a lot of homeless veterans self-medicate. The other thing is this sense of loss without the camaraderie that you have had to help you in an enormously structured world. I mean, if anybody who's been in the military service will tell you it's enormously structured. Suddenly you're out on the street, there's no structure. It's called freedom. Some years back, I think it was 4 years ago, we had 5 homeless veterans die in the streets of Anchorage. As a result of that, I was asked to come to Juneau and testify on a statewide hearing about the problem and what we should be doing about to try to solve this problem. After that hearing, I was advised by the state that they wanted the foundation to make a proposal based on work we've been doing. And suddenly, later that year, I got a phone call from the state advising me that there was a grant there, which we hadn't even asked for. So we've been involved in trying to first find a place, which has not been easy, and secondly, find a way to help veterans, and not only homeless veterans, but what we call transitional veterans. We have a lot of people in Alaska from remote parts of our state. Not all natives, but people who grow up in remote communities, go into the service. Native Americans volunteer for military service at a higher rate per capita than any other subgroup in the United States. And suddenly they come out of service and they've developed skills and talents. They don't want to go home. And when they tell their parents and friends that, they're called traitors. And where they rest, they end up here in Anchorage. And they don't have a connection with family. And where do they end up? 4th Avenue. Here we go. So we have part of our project is a pod specifically for transitional veterans. What is our first mission, other than getting them warm and safe? Getting them a job. That is our first mission. Every mental health professional that I have talked to in the VA will tell you that the best therapy for a veteran is a job. You have a new team, you have a new mission, you have a sense of purpose, etc., etc. And that sense of loss begins to fall away. Finding them a job. We have an enormous number of partners now. I don't know how many of you know what Labor Ready is, Goodwill Jobs is. These are all partners of this project. Labor Ready is committed to hire 125 homeless veterans a year. So getting them a job is the first priority. Getting them warm and safe is part of that as well. We don't put a limit on how long you can stay there. That's up to you to decide. But you have to work. If you don't work, we'll find you something to do in the village. Now, as a lot of you know, we have been talking to Eklutna for some time, and there was a possibility of a project in Eklutna. The board decided not to do that. We don't have any hard feelings about that. It was a speculative idea. The community council at the time there was very much opposed to it because we would bring in 1,000 new residents that would take over the community council, which I thought was sort of a bizarre idea. Any homeless person that wanted to go to community council, I'll pay him for it. Going to 6 community councils a month. So we walked away from Eklutna. We've looked at some other ideas that we had previously. I sat down with my old friend Jeff and we came up with a new idea. We're not going to disclose that yet because we're still in the process of working it out, but it's closer to the VA clinic and it's more accessible for jobs and that kind of thing. Hopefully after the election we'll be working that out. Finding people jobs is a start, getting them warm and safe is a start, and then keeping them alive for the process. You have on the handout on the FAQ a budget which is based on the site in Eklutna. So we're in the process of redoing that budget, and you'll get a new site plan once we get that worked out. The thing that's different about this, and it's different in nationally, you don't have to leave as long as you work. 65% of the cost of construction is reimbursed by the VA in about 18 months. 65% of the cost of construction is reimbursed by the VA through a program known as grants and per diem. How does that happen? Well, we have a wonderful senator on the Senate Appropriations Committee. We have another senator on the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee. So our delegation is 100% supporting the project. In addition, $43 and change is paid every day for every homeless veteran at your house. When you take those two income sources, 65% debt gone, and the per diem, and you add that to relatively, or actually over 100 grants specifically focused on this kind of a project. And our grant administrator, we have a catalog like this we're going through now. But you have to be there. You have to be in operation in order to qualify for most of these grants. So we're in the process of reviewing those numbers. So you should have those numbers right after the election. Once we're certain about this property and we can redo the cost. The community has been enormously responsive in our request for donations. We get donations on a regular basis, even in this crappy economy. And the other thing that the Assembly asked me to do when I made my first presentation was go to community councils. I have been to community councils. I have stacks of letters of support for this project from community councils, the state chamber, the Anchorage chamber, the downtown business partnership, etc., 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 etc. We're putting together MOUs. We have existing MOUs with Aquila, Workforce, as I said, Labor Ready, Goodwill Jobs, etc., etc., etc. So this is becoming a community project. How would this work? Who would run this? This is run in a partnership under a separate board of directors which includes the VA, who has given us a letter of support, the Department of Military Veterans Affairs Commissioner, who's given us a letter of support, all of the labor providers in the community, etc. So this becomes a partnership in the community. Nothing like this has been done before. Because I have involved nationally in veterans organizations, you now have 49 other states that are looking at this idea, and a number of them are trying to put together something. The key point, by the way, last year the governor called and we met, and the governor supports this project. He actually put it in his budget. I don't know if he took it out because they wanted to limit the amount of capital budget, so the National Cemetery in Fairbanks and Vet Village were taken out of the budget. We have extraordinary support in the legislature. But we need one more statement of support. The municipality of Anchorage have to say, this is something we want to do. Now, after the governor and I talked, he turned to me, and the mayor was actually standing in the room, I didn't know that coming in, and said, you know, the biggest, the people that get best out of this deal is the municipality of Anchorage, because they're spending all this money dealing with all this homeless problem. Why aren't they supporting this? And I said, well, you can ask Mayor Daddies when he comes in. And he did. And the mayor said he supports it. And we've worked with the mayor. By the way, let me say, this mayor, Nancy, and a fellow by the name of Steve have done more in the time they've been in office to get homeless veterans off the street than any other administration I've worked with. And I'm a Republican, but that's...
You're allowed to say nice things.
I'm not supposed to say that too loudly, right? So what we would like to ask the committee to do, and we're more than willing to work with you, I'm not asking for that decision now, there's a lot to learn, and I think we need to wait till we get the new property and we get the new plan put in and the new budget put in, is to get a letter from the assembly and hopefully the mayor saying we support this project. If we have that, I'm very confident we'll get at least a startup grant in the next legislature to move this, because it just saves money. And maybe, just maybe, it'll save one of those 22 lives we lose every day.
Thank you, Rick. Are there any questions from Mr. Travis? Mr. Steele.
You've been working awfully hard on this for some time, and I'm a vet and don't have my vote. I think about where it is and the impacts and so on and so forth. But the saving lives is a good thing. We need to treat it.
Mr. Train.
Just want to see where you want to place this at. The infrastructure we have for good development. I want to see where you want to put this in Anchorage, because I appreciate you doing the community council, but the essence that's going to be when you go back and say, we want to put it in your neighborhood.
Well, this site doesn't have a
Where's it
neighborhood.
go?
This site doesn't have a neighborhood. The community council there is always supportive of the project. So
Have you told them it's going into there yet?
I've told the president, he knows about it. And we'll go back once we have the new site plan, because that's
Most community councils have 7 to 10 people that show up. They got 30,000 people in that neighborhood. So we need to find exactly where it's going.
right.
Mr. Dunbar.
So I guess I just echo that. I certainly want to support this project. You and I have talked separately about it. You said you're in the VA hospital, which leads me to believe it would be in East Anchorage. Is that sort of the general area?
No.
So it's not.
It's in Eagle River.
Oh, okay, so it's closer to the VA hospital, but it's still outside of it. Okay. Well, yeah, I mean, so you talked about partnering with employment agencies. So you, and I apologize, I wasn't able to read it in the depth, maybe it's in here, but are you partnering with any other organizations on the front end, like Rural Cap or anyone like that, who have some experience, building or maintaining these kind of facilities?
Yeah, we're working with the Cook and the Tribal Council because of the native issue that we've, particularly the cultural conflict issue that we run into. Turner is on board. All of those are in process. Catholic Social Services is on board. Keela was a key one for us. We wanted to have existing people involved in providing services. A lot of people don't know that a lot of the homeless people we see are single women with children. And some of these women are not veterans, but they were married to a veteran. And Johnny came home and found out that Sally was having fun down the street, and suddenly you have a police incident and family on the street. We look at the family of veterans as part of the veteran community, so that's part of that. So even though the veteran per se has services through the VA, having partners like the Keela, etc., are very important to us to help with dependents who are no longer dependent. By the way, it works the other way too. Sally comes home and finds that John was down the street messing around. Happens a lot. Any questions you have my email. Give me a call. I'll be more than happy to sit down. As soon as we've worked out the site, so I'll probably be back and give you an update.
Mr. Train.
Just make sure you reach out to the Alaska Native Scouts. There's been a lot of people that went to the Scout Battalion and want to make sure they're taken care of.
They're well represented.
Good, thank you.
Okay.
Through the chair, if I may. Are you kind of coordinating with both the VA and some of the efforts because of the mayor's challenge to end veteran homelessness? Your feasibility study uses the numbers from 2015, but our 2016 numbers have cut veteran homelessness by over a third, almost a half. And we actually have no continuing chronic homeless veterans. We're only qualifying people as chronically homeless as they time in. And I know I was just talking to John Pender today last night that they've gotten the restriction lifted on the VASH vouchers, so they don't have to be strictly chronically homeless anymore because we nearly house them all. So when you look at your feasibility work, are you taking into account the work that's been done to make sure the numbers still work out?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we don't start with 100 cabins. We start with 25 cabins. The idea is to build cabins based on demand and working with the partners that we have. And I just handed out a new resource. This is workforce housing from Missouri that is built for the oil and gas industry. There are hundreds of these to sell, and they will sell them for cost. I was going to give a copy to Nancy, but she's not here. These are fully appointed. I mean, fully furnished, they set TV screens, everything, ready to go. It's another option. Yes, the idea is to build based on demand. If we have a significant change in military downsizing, a lot of those guys decide to stay in Alaska, and many of them don't have jobs. So the idea is to grow based on demand. But the thing that's different about this, as opposed to a HUD VASH in East Anchorage, is they have a community of veterans to work with. And we found that to be extremely helpful dealing with the other two issues.
Ms. Dombowski, did you have any questions since Rick mentioned the Eagle River work? You left her speechless.
Sorry, I had you on mute. No, Rick and I have talked about this extensively, so as we go through the process, there'll be a lot of community interaction, I guarantee.
Okay, thanks. I don't see any other questions. Thanks, Rick. And moving on to thought, we were joined by the specter of Mr. Croft for a second. I thought I saw him wander in. Okay.
I just came in for lunch.
Gotcha. He thought there was pizza today. Now we move on to a couple of our updates. Catholic Social Services, and I think it's listed as medical rescue.
Hi. Stand over here. Hi, thank you so much. I'm excited to talk about this project. But before I get started, just if you'll indulge me for a second, I just wanted to thank Mr. Oliva. I know that we don't always see eye to eye on things, and but we are always trying to improve our services. And I know it's not easy to come to these meetings and say those messages. We do hear you, so I just wanted to.
Could you act on something?
And
That's the important point of me saying it,
Ron.
is take some action.
Thanks. But I'm very excited to talk to you about our partnership. And so this was alluded to a couple meetings ago when Dr. Monsager from Providence came to the meeting and talked about the big gift that Providence is giving the community. We at Catholic Social Services have entered into a historic and partnership with all of the hospitals here in Anchorage. So Providence, Alaska Regional, Alaska Native Tribal Health Consortium, as well as South Central Foundation, Anchorage Neighborhood Health, so our federally qualified health center here in Anchorage, as well as the municipality, to look at healthcare services for people experiencing homelessness, very specifically at Brother Francis Shelter. This group started meeting in May. We came together. Providence and Brother Francis Shelter have been doing a small pilot related to having 2 beds available for guests to receive home health care at Brother Francis Shelter. So instead of being released from the hospital to not a home, so they weren't able to get bed rest, and that doesn't often happen. What often happens is hospitals keep them in their beds for a longer time. So there were 2 beds available at Brother Francis Shelter that patients could be released to, and they could recuperate, they could have respite. And they could receive home health care just like you would at your house if you were released from the hospital and you needed someone to come in and give you special medication every week. And we started with that program, and it's, we really looked at models that were working in other parts of the country. We went down as a team. A number of us visited different sites to see what the best models were. We really wanted to look to the evidence base. And we brought that information back to this group, all of these hospitals that came together, and we really have decided on moving forward with sort of 3 general aspects of our partnership. And one is expanding that medical respite program. So we're moving forward so that there'll be 10 beds available at Brother Francis Shelter. That will be for any hospital in town to release a patient to, and that these are patients who are in homelessness, so these are folks who would normally be using our services anyway, and they'll have a place to rest and recuperate, and there'll be a dedicated case manager to work with them to get into housing. In our small pilot, what we found was that almost 100% of the guests that came through our 2 beds did not return to homelessness. Most of them went to permanent housing. 1 or 2 had to go back to the hospital for ongoing medical care. And when we look at other models, like in Santa Rosa, California, where we visited, and in Spokane, Washington, there's similar kinds of statistics. If we have a case manager working with them, and they have a dedicated time to heal, their likelihood of going on to permanent housing is much higher. And very importantly, their likelihood of going back to the hospital is much lower. So there's a reduction in healthcare costs for these individuals. And that's very good for us as a community. It's very good for the hospitals, and the hospitals are committing to work together and pay for this program, working with us at Brother Francis Shelter. So it's a really innovative and great way to go. And then the other 2 aspects that we'll be working on is expanding our clinical services at Brother Francis Shelter. We have a small clinic that's volunteer run now, and we have volunteers that operate in the evenings, and we're hoping to work to have a dedicated healthcare provider there for part of the day every day, working to have that be a place where some primary healthcare services can be available. But then very importantly as well, this 3rd aspect is transportation. So to have regular, ready transportation for people who are seen in that clinic or as a part of our respite program, to go to the other sites in town where there's already established medical services. We don't want to rebuild a whole lab and x-ray and all the things in a hospital on our campus. We want to use the facilities that are already available in the city. And all of the hospitals are at the table working to do that. So we're really excited about this. Is there any questions?
Mr. Steele.
Yeah, what are you giving up in terms of space or what you were doing before in order to have those dedicated beds?
So the area at the shelter where we're going to be using this is what we call our Laverna quarters. And if you haven't been down to the shelter, I encourage you to please come down. We'd love to show you and give you a tour. Right now, those beds are used in a couple of different capacities as a part of special programs. So we have a Housing First program within Brother Francis Shelter where we have people, when they first come in, we put them immediately in a room like that and are working with them, trying to think about, instead of, as a part of our sort of more general guest population, working with them to see if that is improving their likelihood to get into housing. So we'll still have those programs that run, but we have a John Franklin House, a small other building on our property where we can still run those programs. But I think it's really important to remember mostly that these are people that are in homelessness already. So they would have been at Brother Francis Shelter or utilizing other services in town anyway.
Through the chair.
Mr. Leva?
Lisa, you're bringing rehabilitation patients to get better adjacent to a heavy industrial block. I have a noise permit that's good for a year. I can blow a train horn 24 hours a day. I can light a fire. You never objected to the high pressure, supercritical oxidation of hazardous waste, so you can't be critical of a little wood smoke. Why would you torture these people and expand those services down there? It's an inappropriate location. And believe me, I'm going to blow that train horn, except the insanity of it, as I tested it. They got up and danced on the picnic table and showed me their breasts. It was outrageous that I had on headphones blowing a train horn, and those are the people that are over there. Not one woman. Ooh.
Well, I'm not
I'm
sure
going to blow the train
how
horn.
I would act if someone was blowing a train horn in my area, Mr. Oliva, but I
I'm
do
allowed
hear
to do
your
it.
question. I do hear your question, and I think the question is sort of like, why there? So I think when we, as our group, thought about this project, we don't know what the upward capacity is of this project. So we wanted to have a designated space that was at a number that we knew was likely to be completely utilized, and not have a bunch of extra space, because we don't know how many people we're kind of talking about. And the good thing about having it on our campus is then they have the ability to be connected with all the other services. We can still have, connect with, go to Beans Cafe and have their breakfast and lunch and be a part of the community. There's still, so I think we wanted to, and we have all of our case managers there. And the goal here for us is to get them into permanent housing. That's really good.
Any other questions for Lisa? I don't see them. Thank you.
I'd like to remind the chair they're not authorized to have a clinic or an outpatient clinic. It's not in the conditional use.
Thanks for the reminder on. Updates, Downtown Soup Kitchen, feeding people.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share what's going on down here at Downtown Soup Kitchen. First of all, we've transitioned our name to Downtown Hope Center. So, because we're trying to portray what's happening there. It's a lot more besides just the soup kitchen. Yesterday, we started our program called Feeding Hope, which is a culinary art job skills training program. And it is out of a program that is down in Seattle. Many of you have probably heard of it. It's called Catalyst Kitchens Fair Start. So it's basically a 12-week course where a student is able to come in. They come from various places. We're working with the DOC. I really like the idea with the vets. We'll talk about that possibly being a route. Homeless, we've taken people from our dining hall in. We have 8 cohorts in our first class. They started yesterday. So they'll come in, they'll learn their basic skills, they'll get their food handler's permit, they'll learn knife skills, they'll learn food prep skills, and then work all the way through to the other end. We've already spoken with several different restaurants in town and asked what they were looking for in basically prep chefs and the entry-level food service jobs. And so we're incorporating what they told us into this program, and they have agreed, several of them, have agreed to take the students out the other end, and we will provide a year of mentoring with them. several months ago, we started a bakery. And that was kind of like a pilot to see how this would work, doing job training on site, and it's been very successful. So we're really excited to go to the next step. So our first group is basically the men that we have taken from the dining hall at lunch. I talked with Lisa a little bit down at Beans, and we've been planning like down the road in the future to have it where they could possibly start down at Beans in the kitchen, getting their basic food handlers. That'd be phase one. Phase two would come up a little more advanced food handling skills, and then on into the restaurant. So we're really looking at that, giving the hand up versus the handout all the time. So we have the chef that's teaching it. He's from Turnican House. He was the chef there for several years. He's very excited about it. We have a life skills coach. That's one of the key components is life skills, teaching them how to deal with their automatic responses, those learned behaviors, how to respond in a fast-paced kitchen environment, all the things that sometimes people coming out of homelessness or out of the prison system have struggles with. And so it's 12 weeks of really intense 8-hour training, just dealing with the individual, both in the soft and hard skills. So we've really just appreciated his support. Come down anytime to see them in action. They'll be doing most of the cooking. We're still continuing our lunch program. So after the lunch program's over, then the bakery will be in progress. The culinary will be in progress. And at this point right now, they'll be preparing meals for the women that come up from Brother Francis in the evening. There are 30 women that will come up, and then they'll have their dinner there. We're looking at different contracts. Talked to Rural Cap about the John Thomas Building providing meals there. The bakery already has several contracts. So there's a lot of things that are happening trying to raise up a social enterprise out of the Downtown Hope Center so that we can be much more self-supportive. So any questions?
Don't see any questions. Although Mr. Weddleton wants to know what's for lunch.
Come on down for lunch. It's going on right now. Actually, in 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is CAP team. Do we have anything for you?
Hi, I'm Monty Jones with the pediatric policing team. Senate couldn't come, so I'm here. Just wanted to give you guys an update. We posted since January 1st to currently today, we posted 439 illegal camps. We have noticed an increase on camps going into private property. It takes the police department a little longer to get permission to move them off the property. And we still have our regular camps in Centennial Park, Valley of the Moon, Solomon area. We've also noticed this year 2 pop-up trailers, which is something we haven't dealt with. So we're gonna have to figure out how to move them along because they're not moving. I know Community Work Service calls us up to, hey, we need these moved, something new for us, so we've got to figure out what to do with them. It's business as usual. Trying to get a new program for us to make it easier because it's really frustrating for us when we get something in the system says the Chester Creek, I'm not a Tiger or Biker, but I realize that Chester Creek goes all the way from Muldoon to the Diner Center, so to locate camp is really frustrating. I know citizens get really frustrated. You're doing the best we can because we have other duties, but we try to hit camps at least once a week. Last week we had Rural Cap, a worker come with us to do some assessment, so that was interesting for us to have the community. It feels like I've been doing this for 7 years. Fill out a form, fax it out, and it keeps going. I've never actually seen where these things go to if they went to a dead end. So it's interesting that with this administration, they're actually going to people. If they can't read our handwriting, they give us a call and say, oh, we can't read it, can you send it in? So it's good to see that we're making some progress. Any questions?
Mr. Weddleton.
More about them going on private property. It seems some from South Acre, so I hear a lot about.
On Northwood, International, and Spinard, there's a big wooded area down there. Yes. Tudor, behind the hotels, TGIF, that area right there, that's another big one that we continually get calls to. And then, the little 1B, 2C, those are the big ones where there's more than one camp, I would say, more than 10 to 12. The citizens get really frustrated because they're loud, there are fires, and just the stuff that nobody wants to affect them.
So, what problems do you run into when it's on private property, and what would help you?
Because it is private property, we don't have the authority to go into private property. It's up to the landowners to give us a written
consent to go in there to arrest and remove people. We asked private property, posted the private property, no trespassing, no camping, so that people are aware, hey, this is private property, don't come in. Don't do that.
If it's posted like that and you see people having a party, can you then go on?
Yeah, as long as we have permission. Well, yes, as long as we have permission. Which, whenever, especially the one on Northwood, we can't find the owner. Some say he's in North Korea. We don't know. But there's a realty company who is trying to communicate with that one. We've been in there with his permission once. We're getting a lot of citizens calling in to go in there until we get that written consent. It's really hard. We're kind of in that gray area because it's.
So it's not enough if he has no trespassing or
He
something.
doesn't
That's
have
not
it.
enough.
He doesn't have it, but
if
it
he
is.
did,
It
then you're
is.
good.
Once he does it and gives us a form saying you have my, because even if it's posted no trespassing, the homeowner has to give anti-police department, the private person, the arrest to say arrest them.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Peterson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So, just to follow up on that, so if you do find someone camped out on private property, do you have to tag them and give them 15 days
No.
to move?
They're different. They get 20 minutes, but we normally give them a day. So we'll come back tomorrow. We'll stay there, make sure that they're packing, because if we just leave, from experience, they're not moving. So we stay there for a good 20 to 30 minutes, seeing that they're actually packing their stuff to leave. We come back the next day.
All right, good. Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Mr. Johnson.
Real quick one. You mentioned the social worker from RoCap that went with you. And I know out of San Francisco, they posted a social worker on their #1 most used fire truck that was dealing with the inebriated issues that we deal with so much. And so I'm interested to hear how that went, because it's a strategy that we haven't tried, and it's not a bad idea.
It went pretty well. I think the first time she was new and she kind of told them, "Oh, you don't qualify," and it's not something that I would let that person know. We kind of told her, there's certain things you don't tell somebody. Well, thank you, it's already qualified with my program. So we kind of said, just don't say anything. Thank you for the information, and maybe give that information to a different social worker. I know when we go to meetings like for the VA, I have a contact for the VA, and I was good there. Possibly rather than they qualify. So it's good to have them because we know who we can direct them to.
I have a question. It's 400 plus illegal camps, right? Do you know where they're moving to as you?
What we do, we mark on the tent the location of that tent. For example, they're at 16th and C in August. In October, we find it in Boston, which is an area right there. So they kind of move around. Some of them just abandon it. They get cleaned up. So they just move around.
So basically, they just go from one area to the next.
Mr. McGrath.
The Northwood property, they recently went to the Anchorage Assembly for rezoning, so the Anchorage clerk should be able to give you the owner's name.
Like I said, we're working with a realtor. We're playing a lot of email, a lot of phone
I just go see him. He's here in town, so.
Any other questions or comments? Doesn't look like any. Thank you very much for being here. Okay, with that, it's time for member comments. We actually have more than a minute, as our usual. So, Mr. McGrath.
Yeah, Lon was talking earlier about homeless, and a lot of us see the homeless as the person on the street, but remember there's 7 homeless shelters in Anchorage. For instance, Awake is one of them, which is women with children. There's a lot of people that we don't see as homeless that are actually homeless in Anchorage and every homeless person deserves all of our efforts. To me, though, there are some of these places like Awake that has a deal up here in a couple of weeks, big fundraiser, that needs as much assistance as possible, especially for some of these homeless shelters. The federal and the state funds are decreasing right now because of money issues. So it isn't just the homeless person. I've been frustrated for 40 years too. I've been coming to these kind of meetings for 40 years in Anchorage. And like Rick just said, this mayor with his homeless coordinator and the whole community is making more strides than I've ever seen in 40 years. So I think right now, instead of criticizing anybody, now is the best time in history that I can think of to assist the different providers, and maybe we can finally solve a major portion of this problem that we've been talking about spending money on for 40 years. So I just think that it's going very well, and that this committee is keeping the ideas focused. So I really appreciate what you're doing. Thank you.
Any members or audience has more comments? Ron, and something.
Final comment, you're all welcome to come down and tour it. I don't think you'll be assisting these agencies when you look at their accountability and what kind of money they're getting. So I invite you all to come down and you see it for yourselves, being an adjacent property owner. Don't bring any more down to me. I got my bill unless you buy my property. Then you can do what you want, because I won't even look in the rear view mirror.
Is there anybody that wants to buy Ron's property? Make him an offer before leave the building.
What are you asking, Ron?
Okay, appraisal. When I offered it to MLNP, they said they didn't have the money. 1.2 million. It was 900,000. They did something else with the money. Come on down, I'll give you a real super good deal. Especially the veterans.
There we go.
No, we don't want to be in that community.
Yes, you do.
Well, I was going to say that one of the things that was fascinating to me is the veterans don't want to live in Anchorage. That's why we went to the village.
Well, if they don't want to live in Anchorage, we're not giving them any money.
No, they still live in Anchorage, but they don't live in the downtown area.
Live in Anchorage if you don't.
Any other comments from anyone? Any member comments? I just want to say before we close that one of the main purposes or perhaps benefits of this committee is to kind of keep the momentum going on the homelessness issue, and in bringing all of the people that are interested in this issue, whether stakeholders, providers, the assembly, the administration, various entities together sort of in one place to have these discussions. Everybody's on the same page. And it's a varied and diverse group. We have Republicans and Democrats and everything in between.
Former Republicans.
Don't believe the rumors. But people with varying issues. I mean, homelessness is a very difficult problem. It excites a lot of passions. We saw Mr. Oliva, who has a certain perspective on this, and Mr. Oliva is not alone in that perspective. There are a lot of people I've heard through the community that take a view similar to Ron's on this issue, and I think while sometimes difficult to have Ron up here on one of his tirades, it is important for the group to kind of remember that perspective does exist, and it's something we have to keep in mind in our actions. And so that's sort of the reason why we do that. And there are other people that have a position on this that want to address the committee. You're more than welcome. Just arrange it with Amanda. She'll put you on our agenda, and you can have your 10 minutes of fame with us, and we're glad to hear it. And I do appreciate the providers that are on the other end of Mr. Oliva's wrath at times.
I didn't even use four-letter words.
We appreciate that. But for being here and participating and hearing those things and continuing to do what you do. So with that, I also want to make a quick announcement that hopefully maybe next month we will be moving the site of this committee to the mayor's conference room, which is room 830, the penthouse suite of City Hall. We think it'll be a little more conducive to the normal crowds we get as far as acoustically and visually. So we're making progress in that regard anyway.
Is that a step up or a step down?
That's a step up. And Ms. Mosier.
If anyone still is not on the email list, it's me afterwards.
try not to send out.
And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.